On June 19th, I flew from Beijing to Los Angeles. My first flight from Beijing to Shanghai was on an Airbus A320. Then, from Shanghai to Los Angeles, I boarded a Boeing 777. Why can't airlines use the A320 for every flight, or the Boeing 777 for every flight? So how do airlines decide which aircraft to use on a route? It all comes down to 5 key factors: range, operating cost, passenger demand, revenue, and airport compatibility. Let's start with the most obvious one. Can the airplane even make the trip? The Airbus A320 has a maximum range of about 6,200 kilometers. The Boeing 777 can fly up to around 13,600 kilometers. That immediately explains why an A320 can't fly from Shanghai to Los Angeles. The route is over 10,400 kilometers long. But here's another question. If the Boeing 777 can easily fly from Beijing to Shanghai, why don't airlines use it for every flight? The truth is, sometimes they do. During holidays or other peak travel seasons, airlines occasionally schedule wide-body aircraft like the Boeing 777, Airbus A330, or Airbus A350 on busy domestic routes. But for most flights, airlines still prefer the A320. Why? Because on short routes, passengers don't need bigger airplanes. They need more departures. Imagine you're flying from Beijing to Shanghai for a business meeting. Would you rather have a flight leaving every hour or one giant airplane every 3 hours? Most people would choose the first option. The next factor is operating cost. At first glance, this seems obvious. The Boeing 777 is much larger than the Airbus A320, so it must cost much more to operate. And that's absolutely true. Let's compare these two flights. An Airbus A320 flying from Beijing to Shanghai typically carries around 158 passengers. A Boeing 777 flying from Shanghai to Los Angeles carries about 316 passengers, almost exactly twice as many. But the operating cost doesn't just double. The A320 burns about 7 tons of fuel on a typical Beijing to Shanghai flight. That costs roughly $6,500. The Boeing 777 burns around 95 tons of fuel flying from Shanghai to Los Angeles. Fuel alone costs nearly $88,000. The flight crew also costs more. For an A320, crew costs are roughly $900 to $1,200 per flight. For a Boeing 777, they're closer to $10,000 to $14,000. Airport charges increase as well. An A320 typically pays around $1,200 to $2,000 in airport and landing fees. A Boeing 777 pays roughly $8,000 to $12,000. Altogether, an A320 flight costs roughly $8,600 to $9,700 to operate. A Boeing 777 flight costs around $106,000 to $114,000. More than 10 times as much. But here's the interesting part. Even though the total operating cost is much higher, the Boeing 777 also carries far more passengers over a much longer distance. When airlines divide the total operating cost by every available seat and every kilometer flown, the picture completely changes. The A320 costs roughly 5.0 to 5.7 cents per seat kilometer. The Boeing 777 costs only about 3.2 to 3.5 cents. In other words, the larger airplane is actually more efficient. That's why airlines don't focus on the total cost of a flight. They focus on how much each seat costs to operate. The fourth factor is revenue. Airlines also need to consider how much revenue each flight can generate. Using the same assumptions as before, let's compare our 2 example flights. First, economy class. On the Airbus A320, there are 150 economy class seats, assuming an 85% load factor and an average ticket price of about $97. Economy class generates roughly $12,300 in revenue. The Boeing 777 has 258 economy-class seats. At the same 85% load factor, with an average ticket price of about $690, economy class generates around $151,000. Next, premium passengers. The A320 has 8 business class seats. Assuming a 70% load factor and an average fare of about $345, business class generates roughly $1,900. The Boeing 777 has 52 business class seats. At a 70% load factor and an average fare of about $3,450, business class generates around $125,500. The Boeing 777 also has 6 first-class seats. Assuming half of them are occupied, at an average fare of about $6,200, first class adds another $18,600. But passenger tickets are not the only source of revenue. One thing many people do not realize is that a large share of a wide-body aircraft's earning potential can come from cargo. The A320 has limited space beneath the passenger cabin. On our Beijing to Shanghai flight, small shipments and express packages might generate around $700. A Boeing 777 is completely different. Even while carrying passengers and their baggage, it may still carry around 15 to 25 tons of cargo in its lower deck. On a route like Shanghai to Los Angeles, that cargo could generate roughly $41,000 in additional revenue. When everything is added together, the A320 generates around $14,900 in total revenue. The Boeing 777 generates approximately $337,000. Now let's subtract the operating costs we calculated earlier. The A320 costs roughly $8,600 to $9,700 to operate. That leaves an estimated profit of around $5,200 to $6,300 per flight. The Boeing 777 costs approximately $106,000 to $114,000 to operate. That leaves an estimated profit of roughly $222,000 to $230,000. Of course, these figures depend heavily on ticket prices, passenger demand, fuel prices, and cargo rates. But the comparison shows why wide-body aircraft can be so valuable on long-haul routes. They do not just carry more passengers, they carry more premium passengers and a large amount of valuable cargo underneath them. The final factor is airport compatibility. Not every airport is designed to handle wide-body aircraft. Wide-body aircraft require longer runways, larger parking stands, stronger pavement, and more ground support equipment. That's why airlines don't choose an aircraft based on just one factor. They choose the airplane that best balances range, cost, passenger demand, revenue, and airport compatibility.